All right, good morning. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission Wednesday business agenda. It is Wednesday, August 28th. It's 9 a.m. We will start with a roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Here.
Commissioner Cross,
Present.
Commissioner Mesner,
Here.
Commissioner Oath,
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 commissioners present.
Very good. Good to see everybody. We have somewhat of a slight agenda. We have a couple of presentations from Interim Director Ray. Before we get to that, we have commissioner comments first. Does any commissioner have comments? It's because we're all busy prepping for cumulative impacts. Okay, with that, we turn to, I just would note for the record, we did not have anyone sign up for public comment. We had one written public commenter, Karen Staley, that was with regard to a pending quasi-judicial matter, and so her comment has been moved into that portfolio. With that, we move to consent agenda. Does anyone have questions with regard to consent? Seeing no questions, I would move approval of consent. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. All right, we're now going to move into one of two presentations by Interim Acting ECMC Director Aaron Ray. And by the way, Interim Acting Director Ray, you're doing a fantabulous job for our agency. Really appreciate the great work and the check-ins with commissioners and everything else. Julie's got big shoes to fill, but you're doing a yeoman's job.
Well, thank you, Chair Robbins. It's a pleasure to be back with you as interim director. Good morning, commissioners. We have 2 presentations for you this morning. The first I will do with a colleague from the Air Pollution Control Division, Kate Fury. This is an update for the commissioners on some work that has been undertaken using Martinez-Irwin Fund dollars. So I want to remind you all that Regulation 7 is the Air Quality Control Commission's rule for controlling certain emissions from the oil and gas sector. In 2021, the AQCC adopted rules that were added in what's called Reg 7 that required operators conduct air monitoring before, during, and after pre-production operations. And the changes to Reg 7 were intended to allow operators to explore various monitoring technologies and approaches to reduce greenhouse gases, air toxics, and ozone precursors. And that rule included flexibility that was intended to encourage the private market to identify the most effective and cost-efficient methods for air quality monitoring during oil and gas activities while reducing emissions. In fall of 2022, this commission, the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, authorized a project funded from the Martinez-Irwin Fund to analyze Reg 7 monitoring data and evaluate the success of the data collection process. And that project was designed to assist both the ECMC and APCD in identifying opportunities to improve air monitoring requirements and guidance. The authors of that study evaluated the effectiveness of current monitoring technologies, reporting processes, report submission formats, and the level of detail provided by operators as part of that reporting process. And the results of the study are contained in 2 reports that are currently available on ECMC's website. The first report is called the Reg 7 Data Harmonization Core Questions Report, and the second is the Reg 7 Data Harmonization Recommendations Report. And we wanted to, notify commissioners that those reports are available and notify the public that those reports are available. And 2, take just a few minutes this morning to talk to you about the process, the study, and what the reports found. And so I'd like to invite Kate Fury, who's the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Community Partnership and Policy Program Manager at the Air Pollution Control Division at CDPHE, to share some additional information about the project and the findings. So with that, I will turn it over to Kate.
Thanks, Aaron. So as Aaron mentioned, the rule was intended to allow enough flexibility to encourage the private market to identify the most effective and cost-efficient methods for air monitoring, with the overall goal of identifying and reducing emissions from pre-production and early production activities at oil and gas sites. And while this approach resulted in a variety of monitoring programs. What Ajax found is that that very variety made comparing the monitoring data, from even sites within the same company difficult because there were so many different approaches, trigger levels, things like that. So Ajax made a series of recommendations that could be summed up as basically standardizing various parts of the rule. So for instance, standardizing the names of the equipment and the metadata that's associated with that equipment, developing a standardized list of operational activities so that we can compare one to the other across sites, standardizing the way that event thresholds are defined and described, standardizing the way that the reporting intervals for the monitoring data, standardizing the monitoring data attributes, defining the fields and valid values for describing technologies, and enforcing monitoring site divisions, as well as standardizing the GPS formatting in which this data is submitted. So a lot of this stuff, well, you can divide it basically into two buckets. One are things that need a rulemaking at the Air Quality Control Commission in order to carry out, and the other are improvements that we can make through our internal processes of processing this data to make it easier for us to process and compare the data. So since we received the recommendations and read through the report, APCD staff has been meeting internally to determine which recommendations require the rulemakings to implement and which can be implemented through process improvements. So we've already started to make various process improvements in order to carry out the recommendations made by Ajax. One of the steps that we've taken internally is to implement an application that operators can submit their data through that automates the intake of the monthly reports, and we'll continue to make improvements to our processes beyond this application to speed up the time that it takes to do quality assurance and quality control to the data that's being submitted, as well as be able to make comparisons across sites. And to further this, we're also now opening this up to affected stakeholders, and we're seeking input from affected stakeholders, particularly around the upcoming ozone rulemaking, in which we will rules affected to this program will be discussed. So there's 2 meetings scheduled so far to discuss the overall ozone rulemaking, which will include this. The first public meeting will be held on September 24th, and the second will be October 26th. So interested folks can register to attend those meetings on APCD's website on the ozone page. I do want to say thank you very much to the Commission and to ECMC staff for all your help with this project. We had some anecdotal reports and some ideas of where improvements needed to be made, but really having this data and having these reports written and available to use as evidence as to why we wanted to make the changes that we wanted to make is invaluable. And we wouldn't have been able to do this without the support from you, the Commission, and ECM staff as well. So really appreciate it and value the relationship between our agencies. Thank you. All right, happy to take questions, I should say.
All right, questions for the panel? You guys did a great job. Thanks for the update. Thanks for the report. Thanks for putting it on our website, and we'll all dig into it. Really important to correlate the work we're doing with the work over at our sister agency.
Great, thank you so much.
Interim Director Ray, second on your agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We need Dita Osborne to be elevated if she has not been.
Dita Osborne is on her way.
Awesome, thank you. So, Commissioners, second on the agenda this morning is a presentation for you about a recent federal grant that ECMC has received. We were fortunate recipients of a $12.6 million grant from the federal government to fund the plugging of marginal conventional wells here in Colorado in order to reduce methane emissions. And we are in the process of standing up that federally funded program. And we'd like to take a few minutes this morning to share with you some of the background on the federal grant, the requirements that we have from the federal government, our plans for the program, and the stakeholder process that we are undertaking. I'd like to recognize the leadership of ECMC's Dita Osborne to stand up this program. Dita is our air quality specialist on the Cumulative Impacts and Regulatory Affairs team. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Dita.
Good morning, commissioners. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay. Is it in presentation now?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry about that. How about now?
Unfortunately, still no. I mean, it's okay. We just may be able to see your notes.
Okay. There aren't notes on the slides. Can you see the slide deck?
Yeah, we can see the slide deck.
Okay, is that okay, or do you want me to
Yeah.
try to?
No,
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the methane emission reduction program to mitigate emissions from marginal conventional wells. ECMC is the proud recipient of this federal grant to further the state's methane emission reduction efforts. The funding provides an opportunity to help well owners and operators voluntarily identify and eliminate methane emissions from low-producing marginal wells. This is a quick overview of my presentation. First, I will go over the background and details of the grant. I will provide information about marginal conventional wells in Colorado. Then I will go into our planned program for the grant, which will cover stakeholder engagement and community benefits, the well prioritization process, field operations, including methane emission measurements, well plugging and abandonment, and the reclamation and remediation of well sites. Next, I will talk about the importance of plugging marginal wells, and I will conclude with a Q&A session. The Methane Emissions Reduction Program was created under the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 to reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas sector. In 2023, under the MERP, Phase 1 funding was set up for mitigating emissions from marginal conventional wells. This $350 million in formula grant funding was awarded to 14 states to measure and reduce methane emissions from marginal wells. Out of this, Colorado was awarded $12.6 million. And this funding provides financial assistance for states to help well owners and operators voluntarily identify and eliminate methane emissions from low-producing marginal wells with disproportionately high methane emissions. Another $1 billion will be awarded through MERP Phase 2 funding for monitoring and mitigation of methane emissions across the oil and gas sector. The application for those grants closed on Monday, and it will be exciting to see more methane mitigation projects in the next few years. ECMC is in the process of building our methane emission reduction program to administer these federal funds in a way that protects public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. We are working to identify wells and operators who might potentially benefit by voluntarily partnering with us to relieve their cost burden to plug marginal wells that are at risk or known to be high methane emitters. The funding provides an opportunity to reduce emissions, to get financial assistance and relief to plug old wells, and to reduce financial liability. So what is a marginal conventional well? It is defined by the IRS as an idle or producing onshore vertical or slightly deviated oil or natural gas well. It has a known operator, so orphan wells do not qualify for this program. And the well is producing less than or equal to 15 barrels of oil equivalent per day and or 90,000 cubic feet of gas per day over the previous 12-month period. This map shows where active well sites are in Colorado. As of today, when I checked the ECMC website, there are 47,343 active wells. This map shows where marginal wells are located in Colorado. You can see that most of the wells are in the Denver-Julesburg and Piceance basins. Through an analysis of our production data and information such as well type, we have determined that there are around 12,000 wells that meet the definition of a marginal conventional well in Colorado. This is some additional information. The well types are directional or slightly deviated. The average depth is 6,870 feet. Several of the wells are in disproportionately impacted communities. 2 wells are on tribal lands, and there are 68 operators that own these wells. They range in size from owning 1 well to owning and operating thousands. This is some of the stakeholder engagement that has taken place so far. We have been collaborating with methane experts at CDPHE. CSU is doing a marginal well study that will include methane measurements to be used for the well prioritization process. Several ECMC departments are providing guidance and support to this program. We have begun outreach to local communities, industry, and other stakeholders. These engagement efforts will take place throughout the program. We are planning outreach and engagement events in the communities where the wells are located, and we are planning more meetings with operators to identify potential wells. Our engagement with operators is key for the success of this program. The ECMC Community Relations Unit will be supporting the program by setting up and running stakeholder meetings with local communities and stakeholders. The DOE requires that the list of candidate wells for the program be listed on our website so that operators can determine if their wells are eligible for the program. The application for the program will also be linked on ECMC's website later this year. We plan to share the results and data from the program on the website on at least a monthly basis. This is an overview of our well prioritization process. The data analysis will take place at least every 6 months. Per DOE requirements, the factors being considered are methane emissions with priority for the highest emitters, proximity to disproportionately impacted communities and tribal lands, a demonstrated financial need determined by the size of the operator in terms of production, public health and environmental factors, and equity among operators and regions of Colorado. This is a recap of the project components over the next 5 years. Operator outreach and engagement to assess potential wells to be volunteered. Community outreach and engagement will take place throughout the program. The well prioritization process and creation of a list. Operators will volunteer wells, and then field operations, which include pre and post methane emissions measurement quantification, the plugging and reclamation and remediation of well sites, and then public dissemination of results. This is our tentative 5-year project schedule. We are still in the planning phase of the program, so the schedule is subject to change. So why is it important to plug marginal conventional wells? As wells reach the end of their producing life, they pose environmental and public health risk. Numerous studies have shown that high levels of methane emissions leak from these wells. Without proper maintenance, older wells can leak hydrocarbons into the ground, causing soil and groundwater contamination. There are also financial risks associated with marginal wells. Operating costs are high and the returns get lower as the wells age. It is very costly to P&A wells. This grant can alleviate the high cost of plugging. The program can also prevent wells from going into the orphan well programs and becoming a financial burden for state agencies. We expect this program to both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve local air quality, as well as reclaim well sites. This federal program complements the state's other efforts to reduce the impacts of oil and gas operations on the environment and communities. In conclusion, the grant provides an opportunity for our state to mitigate methane emissions and improve air quality. We know that methane is a major contributor to climate change, and our work at the state level will improve public health and protect our climate. I look forward to working with many of you to do this. My contact information is on the slide. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have, or if you would like more information. I really appreciate your time today. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Great, thanks. Got myself unmuted so that we can see if we have questions. I have one or two just kind of preliminary questions. The last piece of this was it correlates with the state's work in this area. And last session, we received, direction that we're to use enterprise funds to create a program to incentivize plugging of low-producing wells in near people. Do you have a sense of how the program that we've been legislatively directed to undertake versus this federal program, how they might correlate with each other or work together? And that's either to you or Interim Director Ray.
Nita, if you don't mind, I'll start, and then we can add on if I miss anything. Thanks for the question, Chair Robbins. As Chair Robbins noted, Senate Bill 24-229 expanded the authority of the Orphaned Well Program to finance the plugging, reclamation, remediation of marginal wells that are the highest risk of becoming orphaned. And that work will be done with funds that are generated by fees on operators. So one of the differences between these two programs is the federal program obviously being funded by federal dollars, the state program to be funded by fees on operators. Our plan as staff is to stand up this federal program, given the timelines and the requirements, and then we will begin the work on the state program. Our hope is that we will learn some things about plugging marginal wells from this federal program that we can then apply to the work under the state program. They will run in parallel, but we'll be standing up the federal program first.
And under either program, you can't just go, I see this low producing well, therefore ECMC will plug it using either federal funds or the enterprise. Both programs are volitional on the operator. What sorts of, this may be nascent, but like what kinds of incentives or how do you encourage, I know there's probably education components. This is a good method to otherwise take advantage of plugging that may be, risky financially. Do you have ideas about how to incentivize operators' utilization of both the federal funds and the state fee-funded funds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dita, do you want to speak to that in terms of the federal program, the kind of outreach that we're planning to do to operators?
Yeah, definitely. So we presented at the monthly operator meeting this month, and we plan to reach out to smaller operators. We've reached out to KOGA and API to see if they can assist us with some of that. But like you mentioned, the financial incentive is probably the strongest messaging to get operators to volunteer wells, and also the environmental and public health risks that are associated with them. And I think it incentivizes them to volunteer wells into this program so that they can focus their resources and time on their assets that are producing at a higher level.
And it's early in the game, so we don't know precisely, what the appetite for utilizing these funds is, I would assume.
Exactly.
Okay, those were the questions that were top of mind. Commissioner Oath?
Thanks, and really great presentation. Just one really quick question. So with the money that we were receiving through this federal grant, and with there being about 12,000 potentially eligible wells under the program, do you have a sense of how many you think we'll be able to plug through this program? Like what's an average cost?
Yeah, we've estimated that it will be somewhere in the 100 to 150 wells that will be plugged through the program. And that just depends on the cost of each plugging effort, because from my understanding, it's different for every site. But we're hoping to be on the higher end of that range.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the information and the presentation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, and I know it's early, and so you may not know this yet, but what does the financing look like? And do operators are operators required to provide matching funds? Is there consideration going to be taken to the operator's ability to pay, and those type of things in the determination? Or is it if an operator signs up and gets accepted to the program, there's no financial obligation by the operator?
So the operators will not have any financial obligation for the program. It will all be funded through the grant. But what we're looking at for the well prioritization list is to only include operators that have a demonstrated financial need, and that's per the DOE requirements. So when we look at that list of 12,000 wells, we're going to be taking off the bigger operators in the state and really focusing on the smaller operators who don't have the finances to plug the wells.
And how does their existing financial assurance play into this?
That's one of the factors that we've been considering. And we've taken the approach of looking at the operator's size in terms of production, because I'm not sure what we would do with the financial assurance to determine if they're eligible for the program. So those are conversations that we're still having. But I think our primary focus will be on the size of the operator in terms of production.
Okay. I think those are the questions I have. Thank you.
Other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just one question. Is there any of this funding that goes to the reclamation and or needed remediation for the sites, or is this strictly intended to be used for plugging efforts and that's it?
It can be used for all field operations, including reclamation and remediation. The DOE guidelines do say to prioritize the reclamation for sites that are in proximity to disproportionately impacted communities and tribal lands. And depending on the number of wells that are volunteered into the program, we might be capable of doing the reclamation or remediation for all of the sites that are plugged. And a large number of them are in proximity to disadvantaged communities. So I think we will be able to use the funds to do all of the field operations.
Thank you. Appreciate your efforts.
Further questions, Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you for your hard work on this. I was lucky enough to be able to attend the presentation announcing it last week, and I just really appreciate all the hard work done on this, and I look forward to putting this money to use.
Yeah, and I think to conclude, and Interim Director Ray, you're probably already contemplating this, but maybe a quarterly or 6-month follow-up to kind of provide the commissioners and all the folks that listen in to us kind of an update on the success of the program, the hopeful success of the program would probably be in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would be happy to return to the commission and give you regular updates. And we're looking forward to using this program, as we said, to prepare the ground for the ongoing state effort as well.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Ms. Osborne, for the great presentation. We appreciate it. And with that, I would turn back to Director Ray. Did you have anything further for us this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one update for the commission. I will remind you all that ECMC and Prospect Energy recently entered into stipulated order finding violation, or an SOFV, to resolve multiple violations of ECMC rules pertaining to flaring gas during production activities at the Hearthfire location and the operator's failure at multiple wells to conduct annual Braden head testing, which is essential to identifying issues related to well surface casing pressure. That SOFV revoked Prospect's operator license. It allows ECMC to claim its financial assurance and to move Prospect sites into the orphan well program. On August 14th, the commission allowed the SOFV to take effect, and that SOFV will become a final order of the commission on August 28th, today. Recently, local governments reported concerns about the integrity of a small number of Prospect wells in Larimer County. On August 19th, ECMC staff inspected the wells and determined that emergency response action was warranted to reduce the risk of uncontrolled emissions prior to the permanent plugging of the wells. On August 25th, ECMC entered into a contract to temporarily abandon one well and evacuate associated flow lines. ECMC will use our emergency response appropriation to fund this work. The wells will subsequently be plugged by the Orphan Well Program based on their existing prioritization process. Under state law, the director is authorized to make use of the emergency response appropriation to investigate, prevent, monitor, or mitigate conditions that threaten to cause or actually cause a significant adverse environmental impact. At my direction, ECMC is using our emergency response appropriation to address the immediate risks associated with this well. As described in the SOFV, ECMC will require the operator to repay the commission for any funds expended. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for the update. Director Ray, I'm anticipating, since you didn't ask, that we don't need to actually do anything on this front. We just need to be aware of it.
That is correct.
Great. Any questions for the director on this piece? Commissioner Ackerman?
No questions, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Acting Director Ray for the expeditious action on this front. It takes some doing, and appreciate the work that you and staff have done on moving forward with identifying and dealing with a potentially exigent circumstance.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman.
Great. Anything further for Interim Director Ray? All right, commissioners, that concludes the business of the agenda today. I would look for a motion to adjourn so that we can all go back and get prepped for next week's cumulative impacts rulemaking.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, folks, we'll see you next Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Thanks.